And yeah, so I'm Jackie Young from Stanford University. Today I'm here on behalf of my co-author, Christian Holz, Eyal Ofek, and Andy Wilson, to present DreamWalker, substituting routine walks in real life with a virtual reality. So you have been here for a long time. A lot of talks about VR. VR has bright futures. So we envision in the future, people will spend way more time in virtual reality, right? Like in trains, on the right there's me on airplane playing VR, and on buses. But in all of those situations, we remain static. So we wondered, how can we be able to enable users to play VR the rest of the day, even if they're walking, they're actively on the move? So that's why we propose our solution, DreamWalker. Oops. Audio. Never mind. Yeah. So DreamWalker allows users to enjoy a walking experience in VR while complete a real-world walking task. For example, the user is going to his morning walk to a different building on campus, and this is what the user sees in a VR headset. There's New York and every busy stuff in a big city, while walking in a pretty tranquil street, and the user doesn't really see this stuff in the real world, just walking in the virtual reality. So this is a debug scene shown on the left, like we're generating virtual humanoid to keep the user safe in the virtual reality. So let's go into details about what's happening behind the scene. So DreamWalker is a huge system with lots of little components. So we want to give a quick walkthrough about how this system feels like. So the users start their dream walk by selecting a destination in the real world. And our system automatically plans the path in the real world. Then it it actually browses through a library of virtual scenes for a similar path that is close to the path in the real world and the tolerable redirection constraints. And then the user just walk. You can see virtual people is walking around the user, and they kind of keep the user safe. So we achieved all this by using our unique tracking pipeline with inside-out tracking headset. There's also depth cameras, and there's also dual-band GPS, and finally, really powerful GPU backup computer to process all those data and then transmit the VR image into the user. So let's talk about related walks. There are Oasis, which is by Misa Shra and our colleagues, which generates a virtual environment for a statically scanned real-world space. There's also VRoamer, also from Microsoft Research, which allows a user to walk in an indoor space while playing a procedurally generated game. They have a compelling VR experience, and they are available in controlled indoor spaces. They use procedurally generated scene to fit a real-world geometry. However, they usually require pre-scanned environment, and also they support mostly only static spaces. As comparison, DreamWalker is not limited to indoor spaces and works with both unseen and unscanned environments. This means that DreamWalker can handle a variety of different uncontrolled objects, such as like pedestrians, cars, bikes parked on the street, and maybe not dogs running around, but like definitely a lot of other people walking around. It integrates it uses pre-authored VR environments, which is quite different from prior work. And even if the geometry is different from the virtual reality, we use redirection to make sure the user always walks both on the path in the real world and in the virtual world. So this is what the system looks like. It has many components, as you can see. DreamWalker first do path planning. It also do environment sensing about all the obstacles and also locates the user using different sensors that we have. We also have a static obstacle representation, represent all the static obstacles. From the environment sensing, we got obstacle, and then we represent those ad hoc and dynamic obstacles. We fuse all kinds of sensing data we get from environment sensing and then position the user in the real world. And then we render a VR scene to position the user in there, and then we do redirected walking to make sure the user is walking safely in both real-world path and virtual reality path. Okay, so let's start by talking about path planning. As you see before, we already have the path in the virtual reality and, in the real world, which is to find the correct path in the reality. In the virtual reality. The way we do that is we first approximate the path in the real world and virtual world as line segments. So even if there's curvature, we just approximate them. And DreamWalker finds a matching path according to a few criteria, including they have to have similar length, they have similar shape or curvature, and they have similar angle between segments. And then I'm going to talk about obstacle detection. Before I go into details, I want to emphasize a few different obstacles that were identified in DreamWalker. So there's static obstacle, which is like buildings and stuff, and also huge plantation and stuff. So they're usually registering the map. So usually when we're doing path planning, they should be already registered. So if the user walks on the path, they should never walk into them. There's also ad hoc obstacle, which is like smaller obstacles where they won't be registered by the map, and then they're really small. So you have to use our real-time environment sensing system to detect them and make sure the user walks around them. And finally, there's dynamic obstacle, which is basically human walking around. So the other pedestrian moves pretty fast, so we cannot detect them using basic height-based method. We have to use a deep learning-based method to detect them and project them onto the 3D space using the point cloud. For representing static obstacle, as I said before, we just make sure the user walks on the right path. The way we do that is we pre-populate the environment with all kinds of obstacles. And then once the matching path is found, we just remove the obstacle on that path so that the virtual environment is left with only one path open and all the other paths closed so that the user doesn't walk into the wrong path. So environment sensing is a really important part of DreamWalker. It incorporates all kinds of different sensors. It has dual band GPS, inside-out tracking, and also dual RGBD cameras. And the way we do that is basically we start with the RGBD images. So we have two Intel Ryzen's 435 cameras with a combined field of view of 86 by 98 degrees. And it can sense depth up to 10 meters. We first fuse the RGB image and the depth image as a point cloud projecting into the 3D world. Then we project the point cloud onto a plane where we build a height map. So in this height map, you can see almost all of the obstacle is highlighted in this kind of bright edges, which represent really high gradient. And this is a really useful key for us to register which object is the obstacle, which one is not. And also there's color map. Color map will project a color point clouds onto a 2D plane, and then we'll accumulate them over time to project a color map. As you can see, in the color map, you can clearly see the edges of the pavement, which is also very important because sometimes when you walk off the pavement, there's little height difference, but it's a huge color difference. So we also use that as a clue for detecting obstacles. Finally, we construct a ground map. The ground map is what we call, the ground basically is what we call by walkable areas. So we want to know which area is walkable so that we only get user to that kind of area. The way we construct that is we assume where the user is standing is definitely ground, and we do iterative flood fill from that point. And then if there's a rapid height change, it's probably an obstacle. If there's a small height change, but there's a huge change in color, then it's probably off the pavement, so we also recognize that as an obstacle. So this is kind of expensive because iterative flood fill takes some time to run, but we only need to run a few iterations every frame. Finally, we construct an obstacle map as the edge of known ground. So as you can see, we only put obstacle at where we know the ground, whether it is ground or not. If it's really far away, we don't get accurate enough depth data, we don't put obstacle there so that user doesn't see other obstacles just in front of them so that they got confused of what their path is. To make user do this safely, we have to do everything in real time, so everything is GPU accelerated. One exception, as I said before, is human, which they move really fast. We cannot construct a very reliable height map, so we use real-time. We use YOLO to detect their position and map them using the point cloud. And so we have static obstacle, ad hoc obstacle, and dynamic obstacle. We represent them using the static is using the facade and cars and other static obstacles, and all ad hoc and dynamic obstacles are represented by humanoids. So we generate a few humanoids and they walk towards the position of the obstacle. So as long as you don't walk into a humanoid, you won't walk into any obstacle. And so we have the obstacle, but we still need to guide the user to the correct position. So this part is what we call the real-world positioning. Any of given existing sensors is not accurate enough for our purposes. We need the user to walk a few minutes walk while maintain centimeter accuracy because they need to not get sick in VR. So what we do, the first thing we do is we have a GPS, and which is slow, inaccurate, but remain consistent over time, and we have inside-out tracking, which is fast, accurate, but drifts over time. We do iterative closest point to map the inside-out tracking data onto the GPS data, and then we basically project the VR tracking space into the GPS tracking space so that it can maintain a consistent tracking over time while it can also give us fast and accurate response. This can get us accuracy around 2 to 3 meters, while we actually need less than 1 meter of accuracy, especially during turns. So what we do is we actually permute around a lot of different position and orientation of the user's position, and then we find that the one position where the path can feed onto the ground map. Because the assumption is the user's path is going to be on the ground, right? So then we just find the one path that kind of fits the ground map. And this thing is really computationally intensive, but it's GPU accelerated so that the user can walk safely in real time. Finally, there's redirection has to happen. Otherwise, the user cannot walk on the real path and the virtual path at the same time. So let's say this is like a real path that the DreamWalker path plans. And this is a virtual path that we found in our virtual reality libraries. And for example, when the user's position is right on exactly on the path, then it's fine. We can find the position in the virtual reality, no problem. The problem is when the user is a little bit off the path. This doesn't mean that the user goes to the wrong path, but just means the user is not exactly at the center of the path. In that case, we got pretty confused. Should I use the transformation of the next segment to compute the current location, or the previous segment to compute the current location? It's really bad if the user walks around and then their position just suddenly jumps just because their closest segment transition from one segment to the other segment. So we need a mapping so that we can have a transformation that is continuous across the space. So we actually use a really old method in computer graphics, which transform one image to another image using a few defined edges. So in this method, the transform of any given point is a weighted average of transform of all of the segments. And then the weight is inversely proportional to the minimum distance of the segments. So we basically do the same thing for this. If the user's position is here, and then we basically compute the distance between the user's position and all of the segments. And we then compute weighted average of all of those transform and transfer user's position from the real world to virtual world. And then this transform guarantees that when the user is walking around in a continuous path, the user's path in virtual reality is also continuous. And next step, so we have the transformation from from the user space from the user's position to the GPS location. We also have the user's position after the redirection. The problem is this transformation is not always stable, especially with the iterative closest point. The user's like this transformation is jumping around, which is bad. We don't want that to happen. So the way we do that is we first have the current position of the user. In every frame, user move a little bit, right? So they have the they expect themselves to be in another position in the next frame. We also have the target frame. It's kind of what we want them to be so that they walks on the real path. The way we do that is in every frame, we try to move the expected position a little bit closer to the target, so that what the user is actually seeing is the T next, which is we make sure that is within the all the redirection threshold that is investigated in prior work. So this is basically what the user experience. They can just walk in Manhattan, avoid the humanoid, and they can reach their destination. So we really want DreamWalker to be really safe, so we almost ran DreamWalker every day during the last few weeks of my internship. This is the few path we tested. And then we tested in 2 different virtual environments, Manhattan and Viking Village. And also we tried three different guiding techniques. Humanoid, as I introduced before, Pac-Man, which just shows a few yellow dots in front of where the user needs to move, and also traffic cones, which show traffic cone whenever there's an obstacle. So, for example, this is a few seconds of the walking of the user walking in a path, me walking in the second path. You can see the full video online. So finally, I'm going to briefly go through the evaluation. We ask 8 participants to try out our system. We present them one condition is RGBD condition, where they see the RGBD point cloud up to 5 meters. And in the other condition, they see DreamWalker. And they walk for 600 meters or so, and then it's around 9 to 15 minutes. This is the result. People report DreamWalker have higher presence. They enjoy DreamWalker more. And then people actually surprisingly walk faster in DreamWalker condition. But they rate RGBD condition as safer probably because they can still see everything in the real world. Finally, I want to recap. So we present DreamWalker, a pretty huge system that basically have like a real-time tracking and positioning system by fusing 3 different tracking methods, inside-out tracking, dual-band GPS, and RGBD depth sensing images. And we also have an obstacle detection system that detects surroundings and static and dynamic obstacles from like a moving and very unstable head-mounted RGB depth camera sensor. This is essentially a self-driving human in some sense. And third, we have experiment with 3 obstacle avoidance and redirection rendering techniques that guide users through 2 different pre-authored virtual environments. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. I think we have time for a question.
I'm Minri Zhang from UW. It's really interesting work. And I have a question about the obstacles. So you mentioned reconstruct the obstacles before you, in front of you, and near you. But have you ever considered, like on the ground, if the ground shape is not flat?
Yeah.
Like there's a cave in front of you.
Right. That will get picked up by the height map as I so like height map. Sorry, not. Here we go. Yeah. So in the height map, if there is a sudden height change, we think that's an obstacle. So no matter whether it's going up, it's like whether it's like an obstacle on the ground or whether there is a pit hole in the ground, it will all pick that as an obstacle.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Hey, quite an exciting work. So I had a quick question. So what were the responses of those who are walking in the regular environment? Like, so were they actively avoiding the VR user? And was there is there any scope for extensions on the VR system that could better guide how other users can walk?
Can you say that again?
Oh, okay. What was the perception of the external users towards the VR user when they were using DreamWalker?
Oh, right. Yeah. So, while we're testing it, I think most of them, like, they just really surprised that this person can walk safely even if they have the VR headset on. Like, they're asking whether the people can see the real geometry. I tell them no, and they're really surprised at how this can ever happen. So, like, nowadays people, like, just like whenever we are doing the experiment, all of the people is just watching us doing the experiment, kind of. Although a lot of them are still walking, so like we're still testing the human like the detect of other pedestrians. Yeah, but I think in the future, if everyone is using this, maybe there's even better ways to detect obstacles. For example, you kind of know where the other user is, so you don't even need to pick it up using YOLO and stuff. But good question.
All right. Well, let's thank Jackie for that great and memorable presentation.